In November 2018, an unforgettable incident unfolded during a trip to a secluded cabin in the Adirondack Mountains of New York. This rustic retreat, nestled within a private camp owned by my alma mater, held decades of cherished memories for me. With about 10 cabins scattered in isolation, each offering a private sanctuary, the experience had always been serene and devoid of anything supernatural. However, this particular visit would shatter that tranquility. Accompanied only by my 16-year-old daughter, who was experiencing the camp for the first time, we arrived mid-afternoon. Our cabin, positioned in a picturesque glade surrounded by dense forest, emanated an aura of rustic charm. Constructed entirely of logs harvested from the surrounding woods, the cabin boasted a covered porch adorned with a wood rack, a crucial detail for the events that would unfold. After unloading our supplies, the afternoon saw us engaged in the quintessential cabin activity of wood chopping. The absence of electricity and heating necessitated our reliance on propane lanterns for light. As darkness descended, we settled into the cozy ambience, reading by the crackling fireplace and relishing the simplicity of our surroundings. The following day, after a brief hike around the property, we returned to the cabin for lunch. As we lounged on the couch, savoring the silence, an unexplained sound disrupted the peace. It seemed like a heavy log rolling on the porch wood rack. Yet, when my daughter pointed towards the back of the cabin, confusion set in. I had heard the sound from the front porch. Assuming it was a prank by neighboring campers, I decided to investigate, arming myself with a split log for protection. Stepping onto the porch, my gaze turned towards the wood rack. What I witnessed defied explanation. A forest-themed, ethereal tentacle hovered above the wood rack. Brown with white spots, it resembled an otherworldly octopus appendage, both glowing and shimmering. In an instant, it retracted as if aware of my presence, vanishing around the cabin's side. Fear paralyzed me, my feet felt nailed to the porch. Overcoming the terror, I re-entered the cabin and shared the experience with my daughter. Skepticism lingered in the air, but the fear in her eyes mirrored my own. To reassure her, I ventured outside again, circling the cabin. Finding nothing unusual, I convinced myself it might have been a trick of the imagination. As night fell, we grappled with the strange occurrences. During dinner preparations, a mysterious puddle appeared on the counter, an inexplicable manifestation of water in a cabin devoid of plumbing. Scratching sounds at dawn heightened our unease. Originating from the corner where my daughter lay, the eerie noise traversed the room, stopping precisely at the midpoint of my back. It felt like an ominous force focused solely on me. In the aftermath, my daughter remained oblivious to the scratching, leaving me to confront the inexplicable alone. The chilling episode spurred our hasty departure, and as we left, my inquiry with the camp manager yielded no confirmation of paranormal incidents. Haunted by this experience, I have refrained from returning to that cabin. However, a different one awaits my future visit, where the unknown may once again unravel its mysteries. If it does, rest assured, the tale will be shared. It was the middle of winter, early January if memory serves me right. This time of year, right after Christmas, usually brought heavy snowfall. Two of my cousins and I, craving a brief escape, decided on a weekend trip to a cabin nestled towards the mountains. The cabin belonged to a family member, who warned us of strange sightings and eerie occurrences. Their young son had once claimed to see a woman standing outside the kitchen window, though there was no one there. Despite our skepticism, we were determined to enjoy a weekend getaway. The cabin was a cozy refuge, and we set out on Thursday night, planning to return Saturday morning. As we drove through the snowy landscape, we brushed off the warnings and embraced the idea of a relaxing weekend. Upon arrival, flurries of snow began to fall, but we welcomed the added coziness. The cabin was well stocked with firewood, and we had packed enough food and drinks to last the weekend. We settled in, built a warm fire, and spent the evening talking and laughing, the wind howling outside. As the night unfolded, we decided to turn in for some much-needed rest. The sleep was remarkably peaceful, and I woke up the next morning to the delightful aroma of a hearty breakfast, sausage, eggs, and bacon. Excited about the prospect of a delicious meal, I headed to the kitchen, only to find it empty. The stove was off, and it seemed as if no one had been cooking. Curious but unfazed, my cousin Joe and I shared a laugh, deciding not to mention the odd occurrence. However, our laughter subsided when Charles, another cousin, suggested checking our trucks due to an incoming winter storm. Strangely, all 3 four-wheel drive trucks, which were perfectly fine the night before, failed to start. Puzzled and irritated, we attempted to call for assistance, but the cabin's phone line was dead. Realizing our predicament, we resolved to wait it out and decided not to let the fire die. Charles ventured out to gather more firewood, claiming he heard laughter and saw a woman outside. Skeptical, we joined him, only to find no footprints in the deepening snow. As the day progressed, we found ourselves stranded, unable to leave the cabin. The next morning, waking up to the enticing scent of breakfast once more, we felt a mixture of confusion and frustration. Attempts to start our trucks continued to fail, and the isolation began to wear on our nerves. On the final night, we heard what sounded like footsteps in the kitchen, but upon investigation, found it empty. We resigned ourselves to another restless night, hoping someone would come searching for us if we didn't return home. When Sunday morning arrived, our trucks miraculously started without any issues. Eager to leave, we hastily packed, not daring to look back. However, our departure was interrupted by a surreal sight, a woman with long brown hair, dressed in a nightgown, waving at us through the kitchen window. Sharing silent, incredulous glances, we sped down the mountain without looking back. We later shared our bizarre experience, with some believing our story and others dismissing it as a campfire tale. When we mentioned the woman to the cabin owners, they simply nodded, confirming that she was a frequent visitor. The cabin, now a memory, was eventually sold and rumored to have been burned down. Whether the strange occurrences persist on the land, I can't say. As for the woman in the nightgown, her mysterious presence remains etched in our memories, leaving us with unanswered questions and a lingering sense of unease. The hunting cabin, frozen in time, stood before me as I approached. A wave of memories flooded my mind, memories of a time when the cabin was filled with laughter and the echo of my grandfather's voice. A year of neglect had turned the once vibrant space into a dusty relic of the past. It was hardly larger than a tool shed, and I hadn't set foot there in nearly a decade. My last visit had been with my grandfather, Sebastian, during a hunting trip that ended in a terrifying encounter. The creature we saw in the woods had left me so shaken that I swore off returning. My parents dismissed my reluctance as boredom, assuming I didn't want to spend 2 weeks with the boring old man. But Graham, a family friend, continued to visit over the years. When Gramps passed away a year ago, he unexpectedly left the cabin and the surrounding 30 acres to me, his only remaining grandchild. At 20 years old, I never anticipated returning to the rural mountainside. However, a recent breakup left me with a choice: move into the cabin or into my parents' basement. The decision wasn't easy, but the allure of solitude won over the familiarity of my childhood home. As I pulled my beat-up Ford into the unpaved driveway, a sense of nostalgia and unease washed over me. My hand instinctively reached for my rifle, a comforting presence against the uncertainty that awaited. The local newspaper claimed Gramps died in a bear attack, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The first night in the cabin passed without incident, but by the second night, an unsettling atmosphere began to settle in. Fresh claw marks appeared on the cabin, too large for any familiar wildlife. The evidence pointed away from a prank, and my attempts to capture the intruder on camera yielded only empty frames. Determined to unravel the mystery, I drove into town, purchasing motion-activated floodlights and a motion-sensing camera. Yet, with each passing night, the claw marks crept closer to the cabin door. The inexplicable phenomenon defied logic, and fear gripped me tighter with each morning's discovery. On the fifth night, I decided to confront the unknown. Rifle in hand, I waited on the porch steps in the pitch-black night. The usual sounds of nocturnal creatures were absent, adding to the eerie silence. As 1 a.m. approached, a faint movement at the edge of the woods caught my attention. A figure emerged from the shadows, and to my disbelief, it was my supposedly deceased grandfather, Sebastian. Bald, emaciated, and wearing nothing, he moved in a way that defied human anatomy. The shock of seeing him alive overwhelmed me, and I called out to him. "Grandpa, come inside." "What are you doing?" His voice, distorted and barely human, warned me of an impending danger. "Run, you stupid boy. It's coming." Before I could react, he transformed into a creature, moving on all fours into the woods. The bushes settled, leaving an eerie stillness behind. A low growl sounded behind me, and I turned to face the creature from my past nightmares. Long limbs, an ivory deer skull, and ragged buckskin adorned the surreal being. It laughed, a guttural sound that reverberated in my head, and I instinctively fired my rifle. The bullets, lodged in its neck and torso, were casually removed by the creature, which then pointed a claw towards the cabin. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind, urging me to go inside. Confused and terrified, I complied. In the aftermath, Rufus, my grandfather's enigmatic friend, appeared. With an air of calm authority, he directed me inside, warning of the creature's return. Inside, I grappled with the incomprehensible events. My mind raced with questions about Rufus, the creature, and the true nature of my grandfather's demise. As I recorded this surreal experience, the lines between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving me with an unsettling sense of confusion and dread. When I was just 14 years old, my girlfriend and I embarked on an unforgettable adventure that would forever linger in the recesses of our memories. It all began innocently enough when we visited my grandparents' house. Eager for a thrill, we decided to put our courage to the test, concocting an excuse to explore abandoned and eerie places under the veil of darkness. Curiosity fueled our teenage rebellion, and we sought guidance from my grandfather, who regaled us with a chilling tale of an old abandoned house and cabin located a kilometer south of our current position. The narrative spun around a man named Derek Shaw from Ohio in the 1900s, who mysteriously vanished without a trace. Skepticism permeated our minds, but the allure of the unknown beckoned, and we dismissed our grandparents' warnings with the nonchalance typical of adolescence. Armed with nothing more than 2 flashlights, a pair of knives, and a handful of extra batteries, we set out on our clandestine mission, venturing into the inky blackness of the night. The forest seemed to have a life of its own, with unseen eyes and unheard whispers tracking our every step. Undeterred, we pressed on, the excitement overriding any sense of trepidation. Upon reaching the purported location, we discovered the abandoned house, shrouded in an unsettling atmosphere. The air seemed to carry an otherworldly chill, sending shivers down our spines. Undaunted, we entered, only to be greeted by a macabre scene: books on demons and witchcraft, cryptic graffiti, peculiar paintings, and an unsettling multitude of dolls in every room. The house, a seemingly ordinary American dwelling, now harbored an aura of malevolence. Determined to unravel the mysteries that lay ahead, we cautiously made our way to the wooden cabin, situated a short distance away. Yet, as we approached, a disembodied voice echoed through the air, beckoning me towards a nondescript bulge in the ground. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I halted, my senses overwhelmed by an unseen power. My next recollection was of awakening on the ground just outside the cabin, my girlfriend beside me in a similar state of disarray. The cabin, an elusive destination, remained untouched by our presence. Panic set in, but before I could comprehend the situation, my girlfriend awoke with a blood-curdling scream, pleading for our unseen pursuer to leave us alone. Fear gripped us as she described a man who had trailed us since the beginning. Her pallid complexion and frail appearance added credence to her harrowing account. Reacting swiftly, I hoisted her onto my back, determined to navigate the forest's dark labyrinth and reach safety. Miraculously, we emerged near my grandparents' house, but the shock intensified when we realized that only a single minute had passed, despite the considerable distance we covered. Desperate and shaken, I called my uncle, who arrived promptly to rush us to the nearest hospital. As I recounted our harrowing escapade, my uncle's anger was palpable. He emphasized the sheer luck that allowed us to return unscathed, recounting the misfortunes that befell those who dared to investigate the enigmatic place. The consequences of our adolescent rebellion became all too real when my girlfriend revealed a permanent scar from the ordeal. In the aftermath, we swore off such reckless endeavors, vowing never to revisit the realms of strange cabins and the eerie unknown. Time has passed, and we both stand here alive and well, the echoes of that fateful night etched into the fabric of our shared history, a cautionary tale of the supernatural and the fragility of human curiosity. It was a late night in the remote areas of the Philippines, and I found myself in the men's shared house, a humble abode that the male half of our missionary group called home. The cabin, if you could even call it that, was unremarkable, just a couple of rooms where we slept and got dressed. On this particular night, however, sleep eluded me. I had stayed up later than the others, wrestling with exhaustion on my thin sleeping mat. As I lay there, desperately trying to pass out, a sudden, loud knock at the front door shattered the silence. It stirred not only me but the rest of the guys in the hut. We stumbled towards the door, curiosity mingled with weariness etched on our faces. To our surprise, the entire woman half of our missionary group stood at our doorstep, their faces pale and eyes wide with fear. Something had clearly unnerved them. "What's wrong?" we asked, concerned and puzzled by their distressed appearance. They hysterically explained that while sitting in their own house, engaged in conversation and attempting to get some much-needed rest, an eerie feeling had engulfed them. One by one, they felt the chilling sensation of being watched, no longer alone in the house. The discomfort intensified until they couldn't bear it any longer, prompting them to flee to our hut in a state of panic. As the leader of our group, the responsibility to address such situations fell on my shoulders. I, along with a few others, decided to accompany the distressed girls back to their house. The contrast between our simple dwelling and theirs was striking. Theirs was a grand old house, built centuries ago by colonizers, elevated on stilts to withstand the rocky terrain. The owner had generously lent it to our Mormon organization for housing. However, before his departure, he had shared a haunting tale with our superiors. A few decades earlier, children playing under the house had discovered an old hand grenade from the war. Tragically, the grenade had exploded, claiming the lives of those innocent children. Upon reaching their fancier cabin-like home, we discovered that, in their haste, the girls had left their keys inside, inadvertently locking themselves out. We tried every door and window, but everything was tightly secured. Frustration mounted as we argued about our next steps. I, fed up with the situation, approached the front doors and delivered a powerful kick, causing them to collapse inward. Entering cautiously, we split into small groups to search the house. Despite the unnerving circumstances, everything seemed in order, except for one locked closet. The girls had no key for it, and as we debated its significance, we dismissed it as inconsequential. We decided that the girls would spend the night in our hut since the door could no longer be locked, and a sense of uneasy laughter filled the air. As night progressed, some of the guys stayed up playing cards, attempting to distract themselves from the eerie atmosphere that lingered. Eventually, the weariness caught up with us, and just as we were drifting into sleep, a thunderous noise erupted from the locked closet. It echoed through the house as if a massive box of heavy books had been dropped from several stories high, or perhaps, a muffled explosion had occurred. My daily route partner, always quick on his feet, leaped up, pounding furiously on the closet door, shouting for it to open. Instinctively, I joined in the frenzied pounding for a few moments until a sudden, eerie silence enveloped the entire house. Alarmed, I stepped outside, searching for any clues, peering through windows and even beneath the house's stilts. But, finding nothing, the mystery of that deafening noise remained unsolved. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that the inexplicable sound was a haunting echo of the tragic event involving the children and the hand grenade, an unsettling reminder that some stories leave a lasting imprint, even in the quiet corners of a missionary's journey.